The world was your oyster.
Outrageous Fortune returns in a moment.
Hey everyone, I am here with Ben, BTC Sessions. He is one of the most prominent YouTubers in the Bitcoin space. He's made tutorials on just about anything you can think of. And we're going to get into his journey on how he got there and a bunch of other really interesting topics. So Ben, the first thing I want to ask you is, what was your background before you found Bitcoin?
So I actually taught little kids how to break dance for about a decade.
Wow, I was not expecting that.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, because I was like, I could either look it up and try and figure it out, or I'll let Ben tell me. And wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. So my background is kind of in the arts. I was in a performance group called the Young Canadians. They do the Calgary Stampede every year. So they do live performances every night of this kind of outdoor festival for 10 days. And sometimes the crowds are like 20,000 people a night. So I did that kind of high school age, I guess, sang in an a cappella group for about 15 years and simultaneously began teaching hip hop, breakdancing, popping, locking, like different forms of urban dance. And I did that so I worked with a company for about a decade where I basically went to schools and I'd walk in the door, I'd be there for a week, and I'd replace the phys ed teacher for the dance unit. So it'd be me teaching breakdancing and other forms, and all the kids would basically have to go from scratch, like no experience, to having a performance-ready dance by the end of the week, by Friday.
Wow.
So yeah, that was my job for 10 years, and then I gradually shifted, and then abruptly shifted to full-time Bitcoin. I'd say if I fully stopped teaching in around 2017.
So walk me through that discovery of Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, I've always kind of had hobbies in and around, I guess, tech-related stuff. Not super techy, but I always had like the newest phone. I wanted to try all the apps, and I'd at one point I was buying and reselling MacBooks because I'd tear out the old hard drive and the RAM, and I'd upgrade it and then resell it because people are just lazy and so I could make some money there. So I had that kind of interest, and so my news feed, my websites that I go to would often have tech related stuff in it. And so I'd come across Bitcoin here and there. I'd see it mentioned. And so I noticed it a few times through 2013, each time kind of just making a mental note like, oh yeah, I wonder what the deal is with that. And then seeing it at a subsequently much higher price through the year and going, oh man, I missed the boat over and over, until I kind of saw the big run up to over 1,000 at the end of 2013 coming from double digits. And I figured it was time to maybe start reading, learning, and deciphering if it was like a scam or if there was something there. So I spent about 3 months just kind of reading anything I could get my hands on. And after that, I started dabbling, like learning, okay, how do I get a wallet? How do I get some Bitcoin? Trying to navigate that in the early days. It was really difficult to find good information and simple to consume information back then. So yeah, I just kind of muddled my way through it, spent a couple years trying to figure stuff out. And again, the material was like, oh, go to this, go to Reddit or go to this, post and look at the comments. Like halfway down, there's going to be a thread that somebody left of how to do this. I'm like, this is not how I learn typically. I was looking for videos, but I couldn't find some. So eventually, I guess that just kind of became what I did.
Yeah, well, you went from the curiosity to really kind of wanting to learn about it. but something inspired you to actually teach people about it, because you could have just bought Bitcoin and used it. But what do you feel got you to want to actually make videos all about this?
So, I mean, I guess part of it was, I mean, I just became so enthralled with Bitcoin, obviously, and a lot of people do. But like you said, a lot of people will keep it just as to themselves, or they'll keep it as this is just a me thing, and then I'm not going to go out and make stuff. I really wanted to be involved in some capacity because I kind of at least recognized that it was something important very early on. And I tried to figure out how I would fit into the space given my background. So background in performing, I was comfortable in front of a camera. I had teaching experience, so even though it's a totally different topic, being able to teach something relatively complex to a school-age child and break it down simply, you know, that skill set does transcend to other areas as long as you have the cursory knowledge yourself. And I had some experience with video editing just from travel experience. Me and my wife always clip up, you know, bits of our travel just for watching later on so we can remember our trips. But I guess my first foray into making content was I was thinking, okay, well, if I'm in the arts and I do some performing and I know a lot of performers, maybe I'll do some sort of a like a concert series where you can tip the artists in Bitcoin. And it was just like an initial idea. So I ended up hosting, I think, 3 different events where I had local artists that were typically like acoustic artists, or like my a cappella group was singing, or whatever it may be. And each of the bands at this night they'd perform, and then there'd be a QR code on the wall overlaid on top of a picture of the artist. And anybody who bought a ticket to the event would get a certain amount of Bitcoin with their ticket.
Oh, that's cool.
And it would also be a learning. So like the intermission would be learning about how to use it, how to get Bitcoin into your wallet, how to set up a wallet. And there was also a Bitcoin ATM on site that people could use. And so we basically had it so that people could tip the bands with their Bitcoin that they received with their ticket. So that was kind of my first foray. I quickly realized, like, obviously this was not something I was going to be able to do. You know, there's no living to be made there, really. It just didn't seem feasible. But then I started saying, okay, well, it's been such a pain for me learning, and I'm pretty comfortable teaching people how to set up a wallet and things like that now. So I figured I had always wanted step-by-step video tutorials, and I hadn't found that even by the time I started the channel, which was in 2016. There wasn't a whole lot of that. So I just decided to do it myself. And so I said, okay, well, I'll bumble through it. And then when I feel comfortable, I'll record myself doing it again so that somebody has a rough outline of what they need to do for whatever it may be. And I told myself that I'd do, at the beginning, it was, okay, I'm going to do a video every single Monday. Whatever topic I feel like covering, I'll just make a video. And I haven't stopped since 2016. It's been over 6 years now. And now I do more videos. I obviously still do a tutorial every week, but I also do a news show on Thursdays, and then I do a panel show get together on Fridays where I get to just hang out with Bitcoiners, which is super fun. So yeah, that was kind of the progression of how things came about.
I find that keeping a schedule is like one of the hardest parts of doing this, because you can say, I'm going to make a video every Monday, and then you'll wake up one Monday and it'll just be like a shitty day for like whatever reason. But I mean, you've really stuck to it. I've had such challenges because I have the motivation and the willpower, but you know, either something will go wrong in your life, or maybe the video you put out last week, you'll get like no views on, and you're just like, did I explain something wrong? Like, I'm not getting that feedback loop. As a creator, have you had challenges with sometimes, I think in the beginning, because you were probably, I would basically say a pioneer in creating this content, you probably weren't having a hard time finding an audience, because anybody who just looked up basic keywords would probably find your video. But as things kind of progressed, you feel like maybe you did every tutorial in the book that you could think of. Have you had challenges figuring out, do I make something that I just want to make, or do I make something that I think my audience kind of needs right now?
Well, I think, and it's funny you say, oh, I've done every tutorial in the book. Early on, one of the questions, like a year into the channel, that I would get asked is, are you worried you're going to run out of content? Like, what are you going to need to teach? Holy crap, dude. I've got a list of stuff that I need to cover. That's if I just went through that list, and there's always new things added to it. If I just went through that list, I would have tutorials every single week through the end of the year, and probably well into the beginning of next year. And that's assuming no new devices, no new apps, no new anything to try.
Oh, wow.
So there's no shortage of things to cover. I did hit a bit of a rut probably in kind of like 2019, 2020, where I kind of got away from the tutorials for a while, and I started just doing kind of news. I wasn't sure exactly what I was doing with the channel, but I think the thing that really got me back on it was I did a tutorial of how to set up a Bitcoin node with something called my node, and they covered it on Tales from the Crypt. Matt Odell, Marty Bent, and Marty said something like, he said something to the tune of, "Oh, he kind of got away from doing the tutorials for a while. I'm so glad to see he's back at it," and it kind of stuck with me, because it kind of. And it helps that a lot of people watched that tutorial, and it was like a go-to, oh, how do I do a node? It kind of, the feedback from things like that kind of got me right back on that straight and narrow of, this is stuff that people need and will continue to need. And so, yeah, now it's funny enough, the news stuff that I got away from the tutorials with, now I find the news stuff to be the most tedious. Mm-hmm. And thank God I've got Nico from Simply Bitcoin joining me for my Thursday shows now, because he basically comes in as a guest, and he like parses through a few news stories with me, and that kind of, I'm like, oh, thank God, it feels way more fluid now. But yeah, the tutorials, I think until just everyone is using Bitcoin, there's going to be a place for them, and even maybe beyond that, because there's going to be all kinds of different applications and things that you can do, and there's always going to be new interesting stuff, and maybe it'll get very niche, maybe I'm not sure exactly which way it will progress, but I mean, I guess in the end goal is for me to be obsolete, though, right? Like, you don't need internet tutorials as much today, but there are a lot of like subsets of different things you can do on the internet, which people are still curious about. So I'm not sure which way it'll go, but I kind of hope that the bulk of the things I'm explaining now, I will become obsolete because everybody just gets it. So we'll see.
I challenge that, because I think like everyone's, and you know this for sure as a teacher, like everyone's learning style is so different. Some people are going to just be able to dive into like, the docs or the GitHubs and kind of just like figure their way through the technical things. And other people are like, I really want to do this, but like I'm racking my brain at like this README, and I'd rather watch a video and then maybe even like chat with this creator in the comment section just to figure out like one or two problems. So I would say I don't think there is ever a point where you'll become obsolete. I think you're married to this for life.
Yes, I'll gradually fade into the background at some point, I'm sure. But yeah, as long as people are finding this stuff useful, as long as there's like a thirst for people to try new things, and then I'll keep doing it. I think a lot of people, you're right, they do really want to try, and attempt a lot of these things and try out different apps and hardware and things like that and become more self-sovereign, it's just you kind of hit that hurdle, that roadblock where your brain goes, I don't even know where to start. Like there's no like step 1, step 2, step 3. There's no simple thing. As soon as they see and they have somebody saying, literally just do this, follow me, and they just have a little bit of a hand-holding experience through it, they realize, oh, this was not nearly as difficult as I thought. They were doing themselves a disservice by believing that. But I feel like most people that watch the stuff that I'm making, most videos that I make, everybody's capable of doing. They're just doubting themselves, and there may be just a few things that they would have run into and said, ah, crap, I don't know how to do this. I don't know where to find the right answer to fix it, so I'm just going to stop here. But I think people surprise themselves when they start diving in and they realize, oh, I'm not technically illiterate. I can do these things. Yeah,
it can be very intimidating. I remember at one point you used to do coverage and tutorials on things that weren't Bitcoin. I remember a tutorial on setting up my Ether wallet, and actually I think that was the video I watched when I first got into Ethereum. What was the turning point for you to just focus on Bitcoin?
So, yeah, early on, I mean, I always kind of had a heavy lean towards Bitcoin, but I think I didn't really fully think through the idea of quote unquote decentralize all the things, and there's going to be a currency for everything, and whether or not certain things needed to be on a blockchain. I never really dug into the nitty-gritty of that. And so in and around 2017, I think the ICO bubble really had a big sway on me of just kind of how ridiculous the market got around certain things that really had no need to be a coin or a token or, basically, literally things like Kick Messenger being like, we just made a new money that is exclusively used within our Messenger app. And you're like, well, one, you could technically use fiat rails if you wanted to. 2, you could use Bitcoin, which exists. 3, if you were worried about scaling Bitcoin, technically speaking, I suppose there's plenty of more transaction per second coins that already exist. And things like that just became abundantly clear, like, oh, they just want a free money printer. Yeah. Right? They just want people to buy their coins so that they have a whole bunch of money so that they can give their other money that they created for free to these, to customers. And there's no actual need for a specific coin for this use. And then I started going down the route of, well, okay, then what's the difference between what already exists? And I began to carve out reasons why I was here, which for me was a separation of money and state, censorship resistance, immutability, a certainty that the protocol I was using was going to continue to function and offer the promises that I believed it offered. And I wanted to see what was necessary to maintain that. And so I kind of made like a little checklist of things that I believed were necessary. And then I started to just really quickly apply that checklist to other things. And I quickly found that everything outside of Bitcoin for me personally didn't check all those boxes. Mm-hmm. And so while I had a small kind of, not much interaction with other coins, I still had a basket of stuff that I consider garbage now. And I kind of, after 2017 into 2018, I was like, I don't want anything else. I'm going to focus solely on Bitcoin. I think you're right. I did like a My Ether Wallet tutorial. I think for one of my old Trezor tutorials, I used ETH as like the example currency. There's probably a couple of videos back then where at the end I'm like, oh, you can drop a tip in Bitcoin or like Dash and like all these other like stuff that most people wouldn't even be familiar with. Yeah, so for me it wasn't, a lot of people think, oh, people that are Bitcoin only tend to be super close-minded, but for me it was like a very thorough kind of walking through what's important to me, what do I feel is necessary for that, and what fulfills those boxes that I need ticked. And I just narrowed it down to what was actually important in my view, and it was Bitcoin. So it was like a thorough thought process of coming to this place.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't really come to that place till probably about 2 years ago, but I had gotten into Bitcoin around 2016 or so. But yeah, that I feel like either people they have the maturity to kind of make that breakdown of like kind of what you did, or they have to get burned by it enough times to self-reflect. Right. And that was kind of my process, is like I bought into these shit coins and scams, and I realized like there's no place for them. And also like they're probably illegal because they are securities.
Yeah.
You've been a big proponent. I've watched on your show, and I think you did an interview with someone else where you try and like live off of Bitcoin as much as possible. Like you use Bitcoin to buy gift cards. You try and, maybe compensate people that help you to do your videos with it. What has been your journey on this? And like, what are some of the killer apps or like, websites that you use to actually be able to have like a Bitcoin based lifestyle?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's a hell of a lot easier than it used to be. In 2014, a company had a contest, and they said, send us your video of why you love Bitcoin, and the winner, we're going to give you enough Bitcoin and challenge you to live on it for a month.
That's cool.
Which looking back now, because the price of Bitcoin around that time was low. So do you care to levy a guess as to how much Bitcoin they give me to live off for a month? Now, I should say that I was required to actually live off this Bitcoin. I couldn't just keep it. But
well, let me guess.
Want to guess?
Maybe like 5 or 10.
Yeah, it was 5 Bitcoin.
Wow.
I got 5 point something Bitcoin.
Well, it depends on how expensive your lifestyle is. Maybe that wouldn't get so far today.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it was. So anyways, I lived on Bitcoin then. I was able to do it. It was through a website called Broker, but it was like BRAWKER. But they kind of matched people up peer to peer, like, oh, hey, I have a bill. If you pay it for me in fiat, I'll give you Bitcoin plus like a little extra, like an extra couple of % or something. So nowadays, it's a little bit different. There's a lot of different options. So like one thing that I'm actually about to make a tutorial on today is Coin Debit, which is literally like a prepaid Visa card that's fully non-KYC, that you just go on, you preload it with Bitcoin, it auto converts at the current market rate, and then you can just use it anywhere you like, anywhere that Visa is accepted, which is super awesome. We're in Canada, so Bull Bitcoin is just an incredible tool in terms of being able to live on Bitcoin. I can pay all of my bills. I can send money to any bank account. I can, pay off a Visa card. You can do pretty much anything that you like. Any Canadian biller, you can pay through there. Bitrefill has been super helpful, and coincards.ca in terms of getting gift cards for things like gas or groceries, stuff like that. Entirely doable. Let's see, what else? Obviously peer-to-peer, whenever I can purchase something with Bitcoin, I do. So like I earn Bitcoin mostly for a living, but I'm lucky enough to be working in a space where I can do that. But there are, there's tools like Bitwage where you can get your your salary converted into Bitcoin if you choose, but there's a fee associated with that. And if you then have to convert it back, then it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. You're jumping through hoops for nothing. But yeah, there's a lot more, even just as simple as like having a fiat credit card, making purchases with that, but then paying off the credit card with Bitcoin is super easy. Or the inverse, if you do happen to have dollars, something like the Shake Pay card, getting sats back on your purchases. But yeah, like I tend to have as few dollars as possible at all times. I'm not super trusting of the Canadian banking system at this point. And it just feels nice to know that like I'm in full control of my money at all times. So is it as easy as living exclusively on dollars? Absolutely not. But ideologically, I prefer it. I don't mind jumping through a few hoops, and I've been doing it since 2020, I think, a couple of years now. So, yeah.
What did your wife think of all this? Do you think you just went off the deep end when you started doing all this, or?
Well, our lives have considerably improved, so she's fine with it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, she's good with it. She's, she enjoys. I think she's absorbed more knowledge through osmosis than she gives herself credit for. There's lots of things that I'll say to her and she just gets, or I'll kind of almost quiz her. I'll be like, what do you think of this tweet? And she'll be like, oh, that's stupid. Or that doesn't make any sense or whatever. And I'll be like, see, you do get it. And, so, she has absorbed quite a bit. And she's starting to meet more Bitcoin people. Like we were in New York just this past week. I met up with a handful of Bitcoiners for a beer, and she gets along with them great. So I'm excited to bring her along to like a major event where there's lots of people and she can meet all of my internet friends. But yeah, no, she's down. She likes it.
Yeah, you had Fussler on your show, and he's been hosting these just fantastic Bitcoin meetups in Vancouver. He had Greg Foss. We just had one like a week ago with Jeff Booth, and I brought my dad there, and I'm trying to bring my friends because I'm like, I think the two ways to understand Bitcoin and the community and the movement around it is, number one, you have to have some that you physically move around, do all the things, set up a hard wallet, pay for something with it just to see its utility, but also get out and like speak to all the other people that are in this space. I know a lot of people say that, Bitcoin maximalists are closed-minded, but I find like you go to a meetup, it's totally the opposite. Like the conversations you have with people are about the future and like, building a sustainable future and things like that. So yeah, I love meetups, and I always say like, if you have somebody who's on the fence, like get them out to a meetup and they'll change their mind pretty quick about, where this is all going.
Yeah, I think people when you get in an actual conversation that isn't Twitter, people can kind of see that it's not closed-mindedness. It's a desire to think in a way that is, I don't know. You're trying to think of all the angles. You're trying to kind of play out the game theory of why something will or will not work, and so. When you get into that mindset, the first thing you do is question, how do I break this? And a lot of crypto is hearing wild claims about what something will do without verifying.
Yeah.
A lot of it's just like peddling hopium on vaporware, and or that it's something that's totally unnecessary, and it adds unnecessary complexity with no clear gain, other than padding the pockets of the person that created the coin. So yeah, I think when you get into those one-on-one conversations, it's easy to be dismissive when you see a tweet of somebody and you happen to own something and they say, oh, it's a scam, or it's crap, it's totally useless, there's no point to it. But when you actually sit down and you have that conversation, like, and I find the thing that works best is, okay, well, I tend to ask a lot of questions of the person that I'm having the conversation with. I say, well, why do you think this is valuable? Okay. Well, why do you think, how does that work? What would happen if just thinking adversarially, what would happen if this came about? What would happen if the government tried to do this? What would happen if blah, blah, blah? How do you know that this piece of information is true, so on and so forth? And you get the person beginning to think adversarially themselves, and then I think a lot of their preconceived kumbaya, we're going to decentralize all the things and there's going to be a token for everything, those presuppositions tend to fly out the window when they actually have that exercise in critical thought.
Mm-hmm. I think the tough thing is that I would still say the jury is out as to if blockchain can be useful for something besides money. It's like we haven't found it yet, but I also disagree. I would disagree with safety in saying like it doesn't have any other use. It's just like, I think, maybe we'll figure that out in the next 10 or 15 years, but I think it's a little early to say that now. That being said, I don't really believe in many other projects going on right now aside from Bitcoin. Bitcoin is obvious. A blockchain is just a ledger that is infinitely less efficient than a database, but is decentralized. Changing topics here. I think a lot of people, and this seems to always happen in bear markets, people like to tear at each other. And there's been this seems to be like this exodus of Bitcoiners from the Bitcoin Maximalists, and everyone calling each other names and stuff like this. And a big part of it is that, for some Bitcoiners, if you participate in anything, whether it's currently or you have in the past, you're a shitcoiner and you can't call yourself a Bitcoin maximalist, and your contributions to the space should just be ignored or should always be flagged with like, X person used to, shill this coin. Do you find that is a real problem, or is that just like a fake Twitter problem?
I think it's a little bit of bullshit, to be honest, because when you talk to every Bitcoiner that might be recognizable today, every single one of them says, oh yeah, I had bad takes on this. I used to think this. I used to, I was bullish on, name your shitcoin. I was there. And you see people actively saying, well, yeah, you grew, you learned, you took the time and you realized the fallacies behind a lot of the stuff that's currently being peddled. I don't think that that people are beyond redemption just because they made a mistake. I do think that from time to time, there can be some like quick snap judgments on people that are still in the process of going through that journey. Mm-hmm. I think it can be. I don't envy anybody that's coming into Bitcoin and everything that comes along with it now versus earlier on, because there's much more noise now than there used to be. However, there is, in my opinion, a positive new development, which you were saying, there's certain people that are leaving the Bitcoin maximalists. This has been the first time that I've ever seen people come into the space and in either immediately or 6 months to a year focus in on Bitcoin only. I've never seen that before. I've never really seen a fair number of people come in and say, oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, Bitcoin is kind of what I want. The rest seems to not really make sense to me. I think part of it is the quality of content that's thoughtful content that's being put out there. It's a lot easier to kind of discern that message and the consistency of that message as well, versus the we'll say like flip-flopping narratives of what various coins are promising. And as soon as one use case has been now solved and added to Bitcoin, well, we need to change for something else. Like, the whole scaling Bitcoin worry in 2017 was, oh, you can only do so many transactions per second. We need larger blocks and blah, blah, blah. Bitcoin can't scale. And now I'm at a place where I have my podcast linked up where I literally get a few sats per minute as people listen to the podcast. Like I can get paid per minute in microtransactions, which by all accounts from people in 2017 should be impossible without a hard fork. Yeah. But here we are. So yeah, I think there's an exodus of some people that, for whatever reason, I think they'll place. There's a couple things, there's going to be ones that are directly incentivized to say that they're open-minded to everything because they have capital allocated or their job necessitates them giving the thumbs up to things, even if perhaps they know that some of those things are a little silly. For example, let's and I'm going to zero in right now. Let's talk Nick Carter. Okay. Smart guy. He's done a lot of excellent pieces regarding Bitcoin and energy use. I think he's awesome. I'm super happy for his previous contributions to Bitcoin. That said, I do think a number of the investments from his VC firm are a little silly. Like the one that he tweeted out that kind of caused the whole snafu with people saying, was a wallet that basically bakes in KYC and uses it. One of the selling features was, you can use this as your KYC'd wallet as an authentication, like login feature for websites across the board. And somebody replied to him, Ben the Carmen, another excellent Bitcoin Ben. He was like, have you heard of LN Auth, which is a function where the Lightning Network, any Lightning wallet, can allow you to log in and authorize yourself, to any website. And this exists now and is free for anybody to use at any point and can be implemented immediately without the need for KYC. And he thought it was a pitch. He thought it was a pitch for a new potential product. Oh, well, I'm always open to pitches if you want to send me something. He was like, it's not a pitch. It's the thing that you invested in is already open source and free for everybody without the need for KYC. And so I think there's a dynamic where people who are invest in those type of things, unless they want to kind of torpedo where they're currently at in that aspect, they basically have to give the thumbs up to these things and say, oh, these are valid, even if they're shown not to be in certain instances, like I just explained. But then there's others that I think what they're zeroing in on just general internet assholes and thinking that is in some way directly associated with being Bitcoin only. There's a lot of different flavors of people that are Bitcoin only. There's people that just say like, hey, this is just what makes sense to me. Maybe there'll be a snarky tweet once in a while. And then there's other people that will literally just ad hominem attack everybody for like appearance and like every other stupid little thing, or conflate Bitcoin with, we'll say like super religious, almost like, I don't know, you'll conflate a lot of different things with Bitcoin that don't necessarily conflate with everybody. So I think some people will look at a group of people that tweet things that are considered rude and they'll say that is Bitcoin maximalism. I don't think that's the case. I think Bitcoin maximalists are just pretty to the point and pretty blunt about their answers and thoughts on technology. And then the rest is just Twitter. Like, have you been on the rest of Twitter? It's equally toxic. Everybody's an asshole on the internet. So
you gotta be blunt, right?
Yourself.
200 something characters. One of the things that I find so tough about this is you'll have someone like Nick Carter who's written some amazing thought pieces on Bitcoin that I've sent to other people that I want to stray away from shitcoinery and things like that. And then, he'll do something to, I guess, change his image in a way that makes me not want to share that person's articles. And again, these are just individual cases.
The blonde hair, right? The blonde hair is what you're talking about.
Yeah. And the stash, maybe. But no, like, I think the difficulty in this is like, it's just like with everything, right? It's like, how do you separate the art from the artist, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and I guess everyone has to make their own decisions as to like, well, I still like their contribution, so I'll share their stuff, versus I like their contribution, but I don't want people to go down the rabbit hole that is this person and where they've gone, right? Mm-hmm. I think Nick Carter falls into that basket where maybe now, hardcore Bitcoiners are less likely to share their stuff to get new people into the space or to share his thoughts just because, his behavior. But then you have people, which I just see get like an enormous amount of disrespect. And again, there's no like objective right or wrong way to handle this, but you've had him on your show like a while ago, Eric Voorhees. He's one of the most important contributors, in my opinion, in Bitcoin. Like, he funded so many early Bitcoin startups. He's been through the thick of a lot of the different forks and consensus issues, but I think a lot of the new Bitcoin maximalists, they don't see that, and they see a guy who runs Shapeshift, and maybe he tweets about, oh, you can trade Doge on our thing. And I go through, and it's just, and I know that you have to pick your own battles, but he's going through and he's just constantly fighting with these, I guess, hardcore maximalists who are just, calling him like a bullshit artist. And it's rough to kind of try and figure out, when do you stand up for people like that versus let them fight their own battles? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, okay, so there's a couple examples. So Eric Voorhees is somebody that I actually quite like. Yeah. He, in general, as his ideology around life in general, I very much agree with, right? Like, very kind of libertarian, like, to each their own. As long as you're not hurting somebody, then you should be able to be left alone and live your life in peace. I very much agree with that. I don't, there's a couple things there. Number one, the general, his place of value on other protocols, I just don't agree with. That's fine. I know that there's a lot of bad blood between him and Bitcoiners for him championing the SegWit 2x fork and saying, oh yeah, we're going to go ahead and do this. A lot of people view that as a bit of a power grab. And, there's been people that after the fact have said, like, this was a mistake, like Wences, Cazares, I believe his name, I'm probably mispronouncing it, but he came out afterwards. He was like, yeah, this was a mistake. We shouldn't have done this. But Voorhees, I don't think he's ever quite said, like, that was a bad call. This was not, I realize now that would have centralized things. He's never really come out and said that. And I think there's a lot of people that were just kind of hoping that he would have said something to that tune. So, that's kind of the brunt of what I see with him. A lot of people would go a bit more extreme with that. But yeah, I think he made a number of bad calls in and around that situation. And I just have a general disagreement with him around, like, what protocols actually have value or will have value moving forward, and why. But besides the fact, I think that his life view is totally in line with mine. Another example of somebody who got some flack, who I totally disagreed with, and I said it on Twitter, was Natalie Brunell when she had that course. It was like $850 or something for whatever, and and it was before. I don't even think to this day anybody even knows what the course. Like, I talked to her, I was like, so what? walk me through what the course was and everything. Sounded like pretty well rounded. Sounded like but it really confused me when somebody said, "Hey, you can come to this course and you'll get one-on-ones and walkthroughs and everything. We're gonna give you all this knowledge on various aspects, and this is how much it is, and it's we've taken the time to put this together. It's not just going to be free for general consumption because you're going to come to these physical meetings. There's going to be interactive onlines, all that kind of stuff." And a lot of people were like, I got tagged in a bunch of things too. They're like, "Oh, fucking $850, what a scam. Mm-hmm. Just go use BTC Sessions." And I was like, yeah, my stuff is like, I have a bunch of free stuff on there, but why would you be angry at capitalism? If somebody wants to go and freely pay for a course that's specifically Bitcoin, and it was specifically Bitcoin, I don't know, why do you care? And to even further play on that, I have 6 years worth of free content online right now that people can do for tutorials for everything. I still regularly have people ask me to book me for one-on-one online sessions. So I started doing that, and I still do it. And I always say, like, "Hey, there's free tutorial right here. You can take a look through this." And they're like, "Listen, I run into problems. I need immediate answers as I'm doing it. Otherwise, I won't do it." So yeah, and that's fine. And I started doing courses. Like when I was in Vancouver, I did a cold card deep dive for like 4 hours with people, and that was like a ticketed event. So just stupid things like that where I'm like, so you don't like the price, don't buy it. Like it's a free market. And so, if I went out and priced, or if I took all my tutorials offline and I put them behind a paywall and they were $200 each, I'm sure a lot of people would have a problem with that. I mean, it's within my right to do it. I'm not going to do it. But at the same time, there might be somebody who would pay for that. I don't know. I'm not about to test that theory, but I wouldn't be upset for somebody putting time and effort to make something, offering it and saying this is the price, and then letting the market decide if they would like to pay for that product or service. Like, I don't know. I think it's dumb.
Yeah. And like, I don't know. You kind of like choose how much you let these things take up rent in your head. But the thing I find hypocritical about some of these like very hardcore Bitcoiners is like they call out people who do proof of work to make a course, right? And they do the work to do something, and then they want to sell it, and it's just like, look, it kind of goes against like libertarianism or whatever you want to call it to not let people make their own choices, or to try and like call everything a scam that you wouldn't do, right? It's just like let people come to their own conclusions, and don't exclude or alienate people who just come to their own conclusions, right? But yeah, all right, moving away from all that toxic stuff, because I do think it's like, again, it's like a very loud minority of people that seem to be ticking off like the Nick Carters and the Udis of the world. Like it's just totally not representative of most Bitcoiners, but it helps maybe them get it off their chest to make it seem like it's more than just like 10 people.
Yeah. And even to add in a final point there, to play devil's advocate, sometimes there'll be tweets that are just in poor taste, whatever. Don't look at them. But, some of those people, some of the like the most toxic people are the ones that call out like the scammy bullshit earliest. Yeah. And so, there's always going to be a pretty wide range of how people handle this stuff and how people handle themselves online. And some of the biggest assholes on Twitter are also some of the people that are the most right very early with some of these things. So, take it for what it is. Yeah. If you don't like interacting with somebody, then don't. But some of those people, I still find value in what they have to say, and sometimes I'll cringe at a tweet and go, ooh, and then I'll just have to go on living my life as we all should.
I know. Yeah. I want to ask you about merchants accepting Bitcoin, because this is something that has changed throughout the years. I did a lot of like research on this, And it felt to me that like almost 2013, 2015 was in some ways peak merchant adoption because everybody kind of wanted to like experiment with it. Everyone wanted to accept Bitcoin in their business. And now they seem less willing. I was in Toronto and I did a great interview with Ali from Tahini's, and they are, they're known for doing the Michael Saylor move, putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And I asked him, like, why don't you accept it at your business? And it was a litany of like, there's taxation issues, there's, training staff, things like that. And we're just, we just don't want to go down that road. Do you still think it's important to push for people to accept Bitcoin as a form of payment? Or do we have to kind of wait until there's better tools like Strike kind of globally to make that push?
So I think there's a couple notes here to hit on. Number one, 2013 to 2015, the reason behind merchant adoption was why that push it ended up failing is because everybody was pushing it as you need to accept Bitcoin because when, and the merchants, it wasn't the merchants that were like, I need to accept Bitcoin. It was like people saying to them, you need to accept Bitcoin because then all these Bitcoin people are going to come to your business. And which just wasn't true because the chances, like as an online merchant, maybe you might get some additional pickup from that. But as a brick and mortar business, the chances that somebody walking through the door, one, has Bitcoin, and two, is actually wanting to spend it at your store are very, very minimal. And so a lot of companies, they didn't give a shit about any of this. They added it as a marketing shtick to get more business. And when that business didn't come, we get all of the articles of such and such is no longer accepting Bitcoin because nobody's. I think this time around, I think the better approach is one, back then it didn't make sense in terms of scaling, even though it wasn't fully, the ideas weren't fully fleshed out yet. But had all of those merchants stayed accepting Bitcoin as is, they would have run into a lot of issues in and around accepting on-chain Bitcoin, scaling wise, in terms of transaction fees, especially in and around late 2017 when nobody was batching transactions, when fees were hitting highs, whereas SegWit usage was just starting. There was basically no scaling. And so if they would have stayed with it, they would have dropped out in 2017 anyways. We're much better positioned with Lightning Network now to get people on board accepting payments. And there's some unique uses, like my example of the podcasting 2.0, stuff like that. But I'm more keen on merchants accepting Bitcoin because they want Bitcoin versus merchants accepting Bitcoin because they think that people are going to spend Bitcoin with them specifically. There's other reasons as well, right? Where merchants, for instance, in El Salvador that get raked over the coals for accepting credit card payments, whereas you don't have that and you can instantly convert back to dollars if you need to, or just accept the Bitcoin directly. That's a major use case. But in like first world countries, I think the adoption I would like to see is a merchant accepts Bitcoin because either one, they want to keep that Bitcoin and save it, or two, they don't trust the legacy financial system and they would like to have funds outside of it. Those two things, I think, are the ways that Bitcoin merchant adoption can grow steadily and sustainably versus trying to make it like, let's push everybody to do this, because then it just gets neglected when inevitably people aren't walking in off the street spending Bitcoin all the time. I think it's better than it is now, but like people aren't going to buy a currency to then spend that currency. You got to kind of get a circular thing going. I'm super interested in merchants that accept Bitcoin because I earn it. And if I can spend it directly instead of converting it through some exchange or whatever, that's a bonus for me. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot more to be thought about than just, when are all the merchants going to accept? It's the reason behind it is important too.
Yeah, I struggle with this, depending on who I talk to, because I think for sure since Michael Saylor came into the space, he's pushed this idea of like, it's a digital gold, it's a store of value forever. Why would you spend it, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, he's saying every company has to support Lightning. If you want to be part of the internet in the next 2 years, you got to have Lightning support. It's just like, well, Lightning is designed for micropayments. It's designed for peer-to-peer direct transactions. Mm-hmm. And so I think as Bitcoiners, I find there's a shockingly large amount of Bitcoiners who don't really care for it to be accepted as a form of payment. But at the same time, if you want to get more people into the fold, they have to look at it as a currency, I think, to some extent. The number one thing, when you talk to no coiners, the number one thing you hear is well, Bitcoin's not a currency. I can't spend it anywhere. And it's just well, yeah, it's we can shrug it off, right? Because we know what it actually is and it's fine. That stuff's coming down the pipeline. But eventually, I think a snowball has to start rolling for it to be adopted as a currency, and maybe that's 100 years from now when it replaces fiat or something. But I'd like to see it happen now because the tech is there. I think it's just a matter of, yeah, you're right. As a merchant, you kind of have to do the risk to reward analysis, and you actually have to want the Bitcoin. But yeah. You did a couple of videos with merchants, setting it up with them, and you use BitPay and stuff like that. If you just went on blindly went to a store and you were just hey, you guys should accept Bitcoin. How would you walk them through that process? How would you convince them to actually accept it? Because I've wanted to do this with a lot of places I go to, and I'm you kind of have a couple chances to do it before you come off as desperate, come on, take Bitcoin, right? How do you actually approach it, I guess, pragmatically?
So it depends. So number one, just before we move on, people that cringed when you said BitPay, this was a video from a few years ago, and BitPay I'm not as much of a fan of anymore, although I will give them a tip of the hat because I think they do Lightning now. So, it took them how many years to add SegWit, but I guess they've kind of bent the knee at this point. Either way, that's okay. BTC Pay. There we go. But I digress. I think there's a few ways you can go about this. So one interesting way would be simply using Breeze Wallet, because it has a point of sale terminal built into it, which cool. Eventually will just be its own downloadable app. But
so you can just write up invoices on it, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can literally I can. I'm just looking at it right now, but yeah, there's a point of sale, and even me and my daughter will use it as a learning tool, because she likes to make little stores at home, and she'll find things around the house and pretend she has a shop, and then she comes to the shop, and so there's this will be audio only as well, I'm sure, but there's a point of sale terminal. You can add items, set prices in cool. Bitcoin or in dollars or whatever. You can tap the items whenever somebody brings them up. It'll give you a final amount. And the cool thing that we were doing is I had the Coin Corner Lightning debit card, and you can tap with NFC, and it works with the Breeze point of sale terminal. So we would do little store transactions. Oh, I'd like to buy these pens, and she'd put them in a bag, and she'd tap pen 3 times, and then I'd tap my card, and it would pay her X number of sats directly into the wallet. So I mean, things like the Breeze point of sale, you can set your currency, and you would be accepting and just holding the Bitcoin, which is preferable. Mm-hmm. You can also go through something like OpenNode, which is like a third-party solution, but they do Bitcoin on-chain and Lightning. They can convert whatever you need into dollars. You can do all of that. That's fine. BTC Pay is a little bit more difficult for like brick and mortar, I would say, to get that going, like to set up all the stores. There's a lot of like pre-setup, but for an online merchant that wants to accept Bitcoin and keep it, then it's pretty solid. But it would depend on what kind of a store. I would, for simplicity's sake, I would walk into a store and say, hey, do you guys want, like, do you understand what Bitcoin is? Do you want to accept it? If I can get them to accept it, or if they're interested in it, or say like, oh yeah, if somebody comes in for a purchase, sure, I'd do that. I just get them to download Breeze, and I'd say, here, tap this button, put in the price in dollars, and then I'll scan it and send you money. And like that, it's super simple. Mm-hmm. So I think that would be my, and then there's others that are kind of doing some great things. Ibex Mercado. Yeah.
That was all over El Salvador when we were using it.
Yeah, exactly. And those guys were from Nicaragua?
I think so, or Guatemala. Yeah.
Guatemala. Sorry, I'm mixing up my geography. Yeah. So they drove over from Guatemala when they heard everything going on, and they boots on the ground, and they started building, and so they're killing it. But yeah, Ibex, OpenNode, BTC Pay for the DIY, or just very simple on the spot, download Breeze Wallet and just go.
Nice. Yeah, I think you're right. Going back to like your previous point is I think you have to start with like just the basic question, like, do you want to accept Bitcoin, rather than like pushing it on them? Because I think like I have talked to a couple of merchants before, and I've been like, oh, you guys should really accept Bitcoin. And then you kind of have to go into an explanation as to like, well, why would I want Bitcoin? They kind of have to be there sort of already, and then you can just hand them the tool, right? Or just tell them to get Breeze Wallet. I've always wondered why like Square hasn't, and I think there is a way to accept Bitcoin through Square terminals, but like they don't push it at all.
Yeah, I remember they added it like years ago, and then that functionality I think went away for a bit. It might be back. I'm not sure.
Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Like I'm surprised that they're not. I I don't invest in a lot of things besides Bitcoin long term, but Square is one of those companies where I'm just like, if Bitcoin is going to be widely accepted, they're going to have like a huge role to play in that. I've always wondered why they never pursued doing something similar to what Strike is doing, especially considering like how much they're investing into building out tools on Lightning. But who knows?
Maybe they got something in their back pocket, and then it'll be a big reveal at some point.
I'm always surprised that they never bought Strike.
Actually.
Yeah. You have a really interesting perspective on the whole Trucker Convoy thing, because you were a part of it back in the day. Could you share maybe some of the things you learned about Bitcoin adoption, security, privacy, and the challenges through trying to actually distribute those funds to the truckers?
Yeah. I mean, my number one takeaway, despite everything, like all the craziness that went down, was Bitcoin was the only thing that worked in that instance. It wasn't perfect. It could have been. And that's just based on mistakes on my end and everybody's end as we tried to navigate something very, very quickly. But in all of the donations that came through, with the exception of on the ground people physically handing cash or food or gas or something to individuals, Bitcoin were the only donations that the majority of them got to their intended recipients. GoFundMe, GiveSendGo, all of that got frozen. Everything was getting frozen. GoFundMe frozen at the source. GiveSendGo, they didn't want to play by the rules, and so they said, yeah, we'll allow you to withdraw. As soon as it hit a Canadian bank account, TD froze it. So, those funds were not getting to where they needed to get to, or where they were intended to get to, and Bitcoin did. I learned a ton about the necessity of best practices in terms of privacy out the gate, regardless of how small or big you think something will be, if it's at all contentious. So what I mean by this is we started with the assumption that maybe we wouldn't raise that much money, or it would be, a small amount, maybe a few $1,000, and that the protest would remain in the eyes of the government legal, because what precedent did we have for a government coming in and retroactively saying, no, everything that you're doing is no longer allowed. You're not allowed to donate to this. We want all these funds frozen. We're going to freeze people's bank accounts. Like, that was totally unprecedented. And because of that, assumptions were made that, we'll be fine accepting Bitcoin this way and not having great privacy practices, which were just totally not true. So unfortunately, because of that, it was very easy to track. It was very easy to see where those funds were going. It was very easy for law enforcement to say, okay, these addresses are bad, and send them out to exchanges and be like, don't accept money from these addresses or freeze it if it comes in. So I guess what I'd say is, here's your solutions. Number one, use BTC Pay Server when doing a fundraiser. Why? Because every single address that you generate is, or every single person who donates will generate a new receiving address. And so this doesn't give a singular point which somebody can zero in on and say, okay, everything going to this address and everything that goes out of it, we're going to track. So there's that. Number two, the funds should be coin joined afterwards to break those links, because somebody may have donated just maliciously as a way of tracking what happens to the funds afterwards. So they would be looking and saying, okay, well, my funds are in here. I see it interacting with these other coins and moving here. We can begin to paint a picture of what's what. So coin join gives you forward facing privacy at that point. Lightning worked beautifully. worked like a charm. Better privacy assurances than on-chain Bitcoin out the gate, and those will continue to improve over time. We had a multi-sig for managing the funds, and this was primarily, the initial thought was, we'll do multi-sig just to prevent user error, so that no one person could lose the keys. But then it became an issue of, well, in an adversarial environment, what happens if somebody kicks in your door and is like, give me the keys? And so our issue was, we did it as transparently as possible. One, for the Bitcoiners that were saying, don't trust, verify who's behind this. But two, again, just for the user error aspect of it, not thinking that having every single key holder of the multi-sig quorum being a publicly identifiable person in Canada could become an issue. And so my answer to that would be, it probably would be better if somebody's fundraising for a cause that could be viewed as contentious, that if you need that public persona, have those personas vet the key holders. Have them say, I'm not holding a key, but I know the person who is, and I vet them as a key holder. My reputation is on the line if anything goes awry here. And have each person do that in the multi-sig quorum, but not specifically have control of the key. That way, your door gets kicked in, give me the keys. Well, I don't have the keys. I can, if you really need to know, I can tell you who they are, but they may not be in the country. So I think that was a better approach. The way that the funds were handed out, which were manila envelopes, and so I should be clear, once the funds started being handed out, that process I didn't really have as much of a hand in. But I think that the method of handing them out was great. It was basically a package of hey, this is a preloaded wallet. It has these funds on them. Here's instructions on how to download a wallet and sweep the funds. And then you can use them at this variety of different things. You could buy gift cards. You can do this. You can exchange it for dollars. You can do whatever you like through these services. I think that was a good way of doing it. I would have probably blurred faces in the videos. I'm trying to think. Outside of that, those are kind of my key takeaways. It was the lack of privacy from the initial setup, because it was a single static address, and that's just how the platform that was used functioned, because I didn't know how to use BTC Pay Server yet.
That was Tallycoin, right? That you guys used?
Yeah, it was Tallycoin. And they may, and I should caveat that by saying they may have updated so that it generates a new address every single time. I don't know. I haven't checked lately. I think it's an easy update to do, so hopefully that gets implemented, because that would be awesome. But the way that it works right now is it generates a new address for each new fundraiser, not each new donor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there no way to set up like a Bitcoin address that as soon as it receives something, just auto forwards it to a different wallet, and maybe coin joins it in the process?
You could probably. I don't think it exists right now, but you could probably do something to that effect. I think somebody might be able to build something like that. You'd have to set thresholds of like, wait until X amount of Bitcoin has come into this wallet, then coin join to this other wallet. You can automate a little bit of that in like Sparrow Wallet. I did a video recently where you can like set and say, okay, I'm coin joining these coins. After X number of mixes, it auto deposits into this wallet, which could be like cold storage or something. So, yeah.
I am just starting to learn like all these things, because I haven't even, spoiler alert, I haven't even set up my own node yet.
It's fun, man. Honestly, it's such a good learning experience, because you begin to kind of appreciate, like, you start to be able to visualize like the software stack of like, okay, I've got my node, and that means that I can run a Lightning node on top of it that references my Bitcoin node. Like, you can start to see how things come together and how it works. And I find it super interesting. It's such a great tool, even just to learn. So,
all right, last question here. A lot of things came out of that Bitcoin 2022 conference. Taro, new things being built on Lightning. What to you are some of the most interesting things from a retail user's perspective, something that you think could actually get mass adoption that are being built on top of Bitcoin right now?
So I think the Taro stuff is interesting. It will, again, I haven't thought through it all like adversarially as to how, what assurances you have there. Like, you're still going to have a degree of trust, because if you have like a stable coin on Lightning, there's still like, there's a trust that the dollar backing the stable coin on Lightning is there.
Yeah.
So it's but it does give a bit more freedom of mobility with how that works. It's not a network that can really be easily censored, but they could go to the source and freeze the funds that are backing the stable coins. So I do think that could be interesting down the road, though, with what they can do with that, and probably pull market share from other stable coins to one that is a little bit more free. I think that the Maller's announcement was kind of like a sleeper announcement, where the effects of it won't be felt for a while. So he announced basically that Strike, or that they built something that can be integrated to 1/3 of all point of sale terminals on Earth with a simple software upgrade. No new anything involved. They would just work. And this would allow it to accept Lightning payments. And you can pay with anything. You could pay with Strike, but he gave an example of using Moon Wallet. He gave an example of using Zeus, I believe, linked to his own node through Tor at home with channels that he himself set up. And this is all it's basically recreating a system where you get the equivalent of cash, like cash levels of privacy and ease of use, integrated into a digital system. I think that's very important. I think when it was announced, people were like, whatever.
It wasn't
like
a new
merchant
country.
adoption. yeah, it wasn't a new country. Like the El Salvador announcement had weight because it was immediately a large scale announcement. Whereas the Strike announcement of like the merchant terminal integration is like a slow burn, but in 5 years it'll be like, wow, this has changed a lot. I can walk into a grocery store and pay with Lightning and it just works and they don't need to know who I am, and I basically have cash levels of privacy with Bitcoin, and they just received dollars on the other end. They didn't even know I was paying with Bitcoin. So I think that announcement is going to be huge. It's just that you won't see it yet, and by the time you really do see it, it'll be a given. People will be like, well, of course it's like the internet, where now people are like, well, of course this is how it works, everybody does this. But it wasn't always that way. That you kind of there's this hockey stick and people don't even realize it's happening. Same with, I remember when everybody had a flip phone, and then like 2 years later everybody was on like an iPhone or some sort of a smartphone, and it was like, if you weren't, what the hell are you doing? It was such a quick transition, but you didn't even realize it was happening because you were like, oh, this is cool, this is new, and then all of a sudden everybody had one, and it just kind of happened. So I think this will be the same case where in that merchant adoption vein, it just becomes like, oh, we can just click a button to upgrade and we don't really need to do much, and all of a sudden it'll just work.
Yeah, I was there when they had that announcement, and I was like, hold on a second, like if this is actually happening, then like what does Visa and MasterCard have left in their business model? Right? I mean, if they're getting away with 2.5-3% for years, and all of a sudden there's an alternative, the only thing missing is everyone using a Strike method of payment. I don't know where along the chain they are with that. Like, can I go into a Walmart and do it right now, or is that just up to, like he said that they would be switching to that? I don't know.
So I think when he listed, so here's the thing, when they list all of the merchants that are capable of doing this, my understanding is it's like an opt-in, right?
Yeah.
It's not just like,
I guess it was almost like misleading, because I think the way that he did it was like, here's like a list of merchants that are maybe, and it was more like they could, if they wanted to, they could.
Yeah, exactly. Like they could, literally all of them can flick a switch when they're ready.
Yeah.
And so this is the thing. They're not going to flick the switch immediately, but a couple will, and then a few more will. And at some point, some of these large ones will flick that switch and just do a simple software upgrade, and it'll just be there. And then everybody will do it. And it's gonna take a bit of time. But I feel like there'll be that quick transition where just like in at some point something will trigger it, and within a couple of years it'll be like, if you walk into a store and they can't accept a Lightning payment, you'll be like, really?
Yeah.
Huh. And it'll probably come in the flavor of you're paying with something like Strike, and you're a foreigner traveling, and you just want to be able to pay easily and instantly convert and not get raked over the coals for a Forex conversion and a credit card fee and whatever else. You'll just be like, well, this is the cheapest way to do it. I'm not going to be paying like, multiple % on multiple angles for doing this conversion and this credit card and whatever. I think that's where it'll come into play, and it'll be like, well, why the hell can't I do this here? It just kind of makes more sense, especially internationally.
Yeah, like where I see this as a killer app is for restaurants, right? Because they're operating on such thin profit margins, and you just all of a sudden you tell them, if you can get your customers to pay with this, you're going to get that 2.5% back. Their net profit margins could expand by like 20-30% based on that. So like that's why like one of the great things when I was down in El Salvador is just like everywhere you go, it feels, the first time you make it, you kind of get this like, wow, I paid with Bitcoin. And then by the second, third, fourth time you make a Bitcoin payment, you're just like, why is this not everywhere? Like this is easy. And you know, maybe one day it won't have to be Bitcoin that I'm sending them. It'll just be like USDT, you know, on a Lightning wallet or something, or US dollars on a Lightning wallet. But yeah, I think you're right. Like I think that is a sleeper thing. And I think what I see is like the first person to flick it on and maybe report in their earnings, hey, we saved this much by doing this, will have an echo effect through, you know, a bunch of the CFOs running all these other companies seeing like, hold on, we should be pushing this on to our customers because we end up saving a lot of money on the corporate level.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's we'll see when that inflection point comes. It's probably still a ways off. I think a lot more people need to normalize like having Bitcoin and using Lightning, but it's definitely coming.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for coming on. That was awesome. I learned so much from you and your experiences on this stuff. I feel energized. Is there any words, I guess this is the last question, that you would give to people who are trying to create content in the the Bitcoin space? What words of wisdom would you give them to keep doing what they're doing?
There can never be too much content in and around this space. I think everybody is going to be learning at their own pace. They're going to be interested in different things. I think we're getting to a point now where carving out a niche is important, because prior you could just be like, it's a crypto show, or it's a Bitcoin show, or it's a whatever, and that could just be a blanket everything, whatever the hell. But I think either now or soon, it's going to be worth exploring, like either mashing two things together. So luckily for me, I found the educational piece, like in-depth tutorial piece with Bitcoin is what worked for me. But I think that you're going to see niche either collisions of different topics together that become content, human rights in Bitcoin, things like that are starting to collide, or niche aspects of Bitcoin, like a Lightning specific show, or a something around like side chains, or something around whatever it may be, some aspect of Bitcoin that is very narrow, so that anybody who wants to know about that specific thing, it's a no-brainer that they come to you because you've specialized in it. And so I think we're going to see the specialization of content creation in and around Bitcoin in the coming years. And that'll be great, because then you can just go, whatever the topic you're looking for, you can go to somebody who's great at that specific thing.
I love that. I love that because I've seen that through every type of topic or genre on YouTube, and you too, probably like when you started watching YouTube in 2005 or 6 when it started. And now you can get really in depth with like any topic, and there will be like a person who's a specialist at something, whether it's a type of comedy or a type of like technology or something like that. Yeah, I 100% agree. Niche down, find your voice through Bitcoin in whatever aspect interests you the most.
Yeah,
awesome.
100%.
Hey there, thanks so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you want to watch more videos like this, please check out the Kinetic Finance channel down below, where we're posting videos like this, whether it be interviews, shorts, or other long-form content every single week. If you want to support this channel, please give it a subscription as well. Every single one of you counts, and I love interacting with this community that we're building here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.